house needs painting, grass needs mowing. Where's he at?
Hi, this is Hank. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me your name and your number and I'll get back to you.
He's gone fishing.
Hello and welcome to Hank Parker Off the Water. Did I get
Woo,
it right?
you got it right this time.
How
I'm
about
proud
that?
of you.
My beautiful co-host SaraBeth, my granddaughter. Say hello, everybody.
Hello, and happy 4th of July.
You beat me to it. How about that? Independence Day. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Let's celebrate our independence.
Yeah.
You know, to truly be independent, you've got to be totally dependent. You have to be dependent on Jesus Christ to be completely independent. We are all born into slavery. We're slaves to sin. That's our nature. And to be independent, you have to put your faith in Jesus Christ, and then you're free indeed. So independence comes after dependence. So kind of a oxymoron there just a little bit, wouldn't you think?
It
Sarah?
sure is. It really is.
But we celebrate independence of our government. We have the freedom to go bass fishing.
Woo!
Hey, that's a big deal.
That
A lot
is.
of countries don't have that. I guarantee you, I had the opportunity to fish in a U.S.-Cuba bass tournament once, and those guys can't even own their own equipment. The government owns everything. And man, what a terrible way to live. So thank God for America, and thank God for all the people that made sacrifices that we could have our independence and be free today. The military, the men and women that serve to keep us free, God bless you and thank you. And we are celebrating today.
Absolutely. And I have the freedom to yap my mouth as much as I want to.
I like that. Well, that's good. Well, we're going to talk about what independence is all about. Freedom of speech, liberty, and the right to express yourself. And that's really important. And we talk about the future of bass fishing, and we've talked about where we've come from, where we have came from, our future, all the things that we've been involved in, and there's a lot to be learned from history. And SaraBeth has a 1970 summertime edition of Bassmaster magazine, and she's going to read a little something that I think is so appropriate for today. And it was what, in 1881?
1881. It's from the Book of the Black Bass. The author is Dr. J.A. Henshaw, and the quote says, "I can only hope that the reader will experience as much pleasure in pursuing the foregoing pages as I have done in penning them. And he will please remember that though he may differ with me on each and every page, I will not quarrel with him, but should we ever meet as brothers of the angle in some sequestered spot on lake or stream, we will, while smoking the pipe of peace, talk the matter over coolly, calmly, and dispassionately. But he may rest assured that though all roads lead to Rome, and though there are many ways of catching a bass, I have traveled some of the roads, tried most of the ways. If he faithfully follows my footsteps, he will never regret it, and never have cause to wish he had tried the other way."
How about that? Now, let's go back. Let's just touch on what that says. Even though you may disagree on every page, I will not quarrel. And as we meet on a stream or a majestic lake downstream, we will smoke the pipe of peace, a peace pipe, and we will not quarrel, but we'll have respect for one another. And we'll resolve that all roads lead to Rome, all the roads lead to catching bass.
Right. Set aside your differences, and that's what I said, dispassionately. So setting aside your passions on the subject and going on a neutral ground.
That is so awesome, man. That is some fantastic advice, and that was written in 1881. And the author of The Black Bass, the book of The Black Bass, Ray Scott, signed a copy and gave that to me. And that was in the 1970 summertime edition of Bassmaster magazine. So let that be our philosophy as we go forward today. Let's go back in history, and let's not fight over issues, whether it be forward-facing sonar or technology innovations that are somewhat interfering with tradition and history. Let's figure out a way to find common ground and not quarrel. As what was the gentleman's name?
J.A. Henshaw.
Dr. Henshaw said, let's smoke the pipe of peace and come together without grievance. So I like that, and I think that is a good philosophy. So this sport was built on a lot of people that lend their endorsement and their reputation, along with Ray, to help build a better sport. A lot of sacrifices made, and John Fitzgerald Kennedy, when he was president of the United States, made a statement that is forever etched in history: ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And that is just incredible philosophy. That is quite a mission statement, to be dedicated to helping your country. And ask not what your sport can do for you, but what you can do for your sport.
Absolutely.
And I think Dr. what's his name again?
Dr. J.A. Henshaw.
Henshaw. Dr. A.J.?
J.A.
J.A.
Is that dyslexia coming in there?
I'm a little dyslexic, but I'll get it right sooner or later. But Dr. Henshaw, he penned those words, and they're so appropriate. And so let's talk about the early days of bass and how it all came together and some of the players. And before, I've mentioned a lot of people's names, but I haven't really dove into their personalities and what I know about them. You know, there are a lot of people that don't like this person, and they try to influence you not to like them. My philosophy has always been, I'm going to treat people on the basis that I know firsthand. So if I'm buddies with Johnny Morris at Bass Pro Shop, and somebody from another company has fault with Johnny, I'm not going to let them influence how I feel about Johnny Morris.
Right.
I'm going to judge it based on my personal experience, my personal relationship, and so I'm not going to allow anyone else to dictate to me what I feel or think about another person. So I think that's important, that we set boundaries and rules and morals in our own life, that we respect one another, and it's awful easy to find fault in everything. You can find fault in just about anything you read, almost anybody else's philosophy. And I like what he says in the book of the Black Bass. You may disagree on every page, but I'm not going to have a fallout, and we're not going to turn this thing into some argument. We're going to agree based on the basis that we're all bass fishermen. And so I think that that's a good philosophy. So let's start off with, how did Bass, B-A-S-S, Bass Angler Sportsman Society, how did they get so well established? How did they build the foundation that survived all the chaos of other people coming in and starting competitive organizations that were hooks and crooks and didn't deliver what they promised? How did Bass overcome all of that? You know, Grits Gresham, who was a great outdoor writer, used to write for Bass, and he said he fished 2 tournaments that he didn't like that at all, because there was cheating going on. And that was one thing that Ray Scott would absolutely not tolerate. He set the foundation in stone. There will be absolutely no toleration for cheating in these tournaments. You will be permanently disqualified.
Right.
That was a life sentence, man. If you were caught and you cheated, and it was a blatant violation, or a cheating was blatant, you were banned forever. And he didn't play with that. And a lot of people thought, well, there is no way that you can have a fishing tournament that people are not going to have them tied out and pick them up and they're going to cheat. Well, it was, in the old days, you fished against another competitor. So he was actually, you were competing against him, so the check and balance system was in place, because you had a guy that was motivated to win, you were motivated to win, he wanted it to be a level playing field, wanted it to be fair. Right. So he had to sign your scorecard, and
keep each other accountable. Like accountability is what you're saying, yeah.
That's right. And it was a good system. And no two people from the same state would draw each other. He tried to keep it where you wouldn't collaborate to cheat.
Right.
And real serious about that. So in the beginning, there had to be rules, and ethically people had to work together to be fair and to be honest. You can't police everything. It's no way you can police everything, but there are certain things you can make a rule and you can be steadfast and absolute on, and Ray was steadfast and absolute that this sport had to be fair, had to be level, and there would be absolutely no cheating.
As there shouldn't be. I mean,
As
you
there
got to
shouldn't
keep
be.
your integrity, you know?
That's right, and integrity is a big deal. So let me talk about some of the players that lend their endorsement to Bass. And keep in mind, go back to what John Kennedy said, ask not what you can get from your country or what your country can do for you, but what you in turn can do for your country. So Tom Mann was an alpha male, just like Ray. And Tom had his own interest. He had a lot to contribute. He built a bait business. He came up with Humminbird depth finders. He was so instrumental in the tourism and development of Lake Eufaula, which became the mega center for bass fishing. Tom was a high-profile guy, but Tom did not worry about what Ray could do for him. Tom contributed his endorsement and all that he had, his credibility. He lent that to Ray for the betterment of the sport. Mm-hmm. That's noble.
Right.
That's camaraderie. Mm-hmm. That's an independent spirit like people that built America. Being fair and loving your neighbor, taking care and preserving what is important. Forrest Wood. Forrest Wood was, I talked to Bobby Murray. We had Bobby on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. And Forrest was at the very first event before Ray ever had the big tournament at Beaver Lake in Arkansas, the first BASS ever. Forrest was at a tournament prior to that. I didn't even know there was a tournament prior to that. Bobby filled me in on that. That was good to know. But Forrest has been there from the beginning. Forrest started building Ranger boats. Forrest had so much to contribute. He had been a guide. He knew all about the fishing world and the fishing business. Forrest was the single most selfish person I've ever met. Forrest never, ever was selfish. He was always giving. And look how well Ranger boats did. Look how well Forrest's leadership played out for him when that wasn't his objective. He was always working and giving to build the sport. Mm-hmm. That's the camaraderie. That's the spirit that built this sport. Bill Dance. Bill Dance was a high-profile personality, and people say, well, look how successful Bill Dance is. No doubt, but let me tell you something about Bill Dance. Bill Dance was a furniture salesman. It wouldn't have mattered what Bill Dance did, he was going to be successful. He has that magical personality that you want to be around. You just want to hang out with Bill Dance. He's that cool of a guy. So it wouldn't have mattered if he was selling furniture. It wouldn't have mattered if he was a carp fisherman. Bill Dance was going to be successful. And he lent everything that he had to Bass to help build the sport and make it a better sport.
Yes.
It's incredible. Don Butler was a businessman. He won the second Bassmaster Classic, had a company called Okie Bug, but he was a businessman, and he contributed so much. And he and Ray, he would tell Ray how to structure things from a business side. He never worried about what's in it for me. What's in it for me? Well, let me have some ownership in this company. I'm going to help you build this thing, but I want to be a recipient of the rewards. No, he didn't do that. None of these guys did. Bobby Murray worked for Cordell. There were a couple of years he took time out, but he was won the first Bassmaster Classic. Mm-hmm. He was a winner. He had a lot to contribute, but he never went to Ray and said, hey, what's in it for Bobby Murray, Ray? I'm not going to give you my endorsement unless you do this for me. I scratch your back. No, none of that. It was for the betterment of the sport. Blake Honeycutt, bigger than life to me, Hickory, North Carolina. He repped Ranger boats. He and Forrest were partners in a lot of ways. Blake was one of the first pioneer fishermen, great guy. He was friends with Buck Perry. He knew all about the sport. He had so much to offer, and he never asked Ray, hey, I want to be a part owner. I want to make sure that my bread's getting buttered too. Ray, I'm not going to do all this for you unless you do this for me. There was none of that. It was none of that. Let's build this sport. So people are making sacrifices to make the sport a better sport.
Absolutely. I think we lack that in today's culture. We live in a very entitled world where everything's handed, basically what you said, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. But if I'm not getting anything in return, why should I scratch your back? And I think what you're saying about camaraderie is lost in a sense and should be talked about more. Especially, I've read some very nasty comments about people, especially if we're relating this back to forward-facing sonar, people who use it versus people who don't. There's some very nasty comments on both sides that I've read just on your page alone. And there's no need for that. There's no need for that at all. Like you said, we should just be coming together for the sport. I mean, how many times have we said that over how many podcasts now? We're on episode 21. It's just, I think there just needs to be a ground where we just need to put aside our, dispassionately talk about the topics,
I like that. Come together downstream and smoke the peace pipe.
Yep.
We're not going to argue with you. We're going to come together for the good of the sport. Yep. And I think we can learn from history. And that's why I'm calling these guys out. And that's why I'm calling them by name. And I'm going to miss a lot of guys, but I wanted to talk more in detail about what I know about these guys. I established early on, I'm not going to form my opinion about a person based on what someone else tells me. I'm going to base my opinion of that person based on what I experience in my relationship with them personally. Billy Westmoreland, I knew Billy personally. Billy stayed in my home. Billy and I fished together. Billy and I spent time on the road. He was one of the greatest smallmouth fishermen, lived up on Dale Hollow in Tennessee, and was a great smallmouth fisherman, loved it, had a passion for the sport. He and Ray disagreed philosophically on a lot of things, but he never aired that out. He never made that public. When he wrote a book, he never did all this controversial downing because he knew the betterment of the sport was to work together and have camaraderie and build the sport itself. And so Mr. Smallmouth, Billy Westmoreland, was just an incredible guy that contributed his knowledge, his credibility to help build the sport. Stan Sloan. Stan Sloan made the Zorro spinnerbait, what Bobby Murray won the first classic on, was a bait that changed my life, was a bait that I just absolutely, I still have some today, and I'm so appreciative to Stan Sloan to what he did. He was able to build Zorro Bait Company, left the sheriff's department where he worked, and became a great fisherman, and he lent all his credibility to the sport itself under the leadership of Ray Scott. Jerry McInnes, now you're talking about a controversial guy with bass. Jerry and Ray never were chummy. They never were big buddies. Jerry and Ray was butting heads, but you knew that if you were in a room with those two guys at the same time. But if you were in a different room with Jerry or a different room with Ray, you did not know they were at odds. Mm-hmm. They kept that to themselves for the betterment of the sport. Jimmy Houston. Jimmy can't help but laugh. He's made the world giggle. But Jimmy's a very smart guy. A lot of people don't know how smart Jimmy is, but got a degree from the University of Oklahoma. We won't hold that against him, but roll Clemson, but not Tide Clemson, roll Clemson. But Jimmy's a big Oklahoma fan, and they've always had a great football team, and so I'll give you that, Jimmy. But he contributed a lot to the sport. And Jimmy has always been a guy with a great spirit, loves life, and he lent everything that was a part of him to Ray Scott to build the sport for the betterment of the sport. Right. We don't have that today. And there was a young man who I watched an interview with him, and he was raised in the hood. All of his friends and neighbors and cousins became involved in gangs and drugs, and I'm sure he felt trapped. I felt like I probably felt like he had no way out, or he felt like he had no way out. And his mom told him, is that if you want change, be that change. If you want people to treat you a certain way, treat people that way. If you want to be credible and make an honest living and not get trapped in all of the drugs and all of the things that are involved, then you've got to be your own man, and you've got to stand for what you believe. And now this guy is a very successful actor today. He's got a lot going on. He's a very model citizen. And he did all that and overcome so much adversity with his own character. And there's some powerful characters here that lend everything they had as far as credibility, personality, information, knowledge, and participation in the sport to make the sport better.
Absolutely.
Roland Martin, what can you say about Roland Martin? Probably the #1 pioneer in the sport. Roland there's more Roland Martin rules than bass. He pushed it to the limit, which he should, because 99, my philosophy in life, 99 is not a good number if 100 is achievable. Roland lived by that, and Roland lent everything he had to bass, and incredible contribution. John Powell, one of the Hall of Famers, pioneer. He was a Marine when he left the Marine Corps. When he retired, he started his professional fishing career. Very credible man. He lent his personality. He lent his credibility. He lent his knowledge, everything, and allowed Ray Scott to put it in Bassmaster magazine. There's so many articles about John Powell in these old magazines. And John never went to Ray, to my knowledge, and asked Ray, well, what can you do for me, Ray? Let me have some ownership in bass. If I'm going to contribute to all these pages of these magazines to help gather members, I want my bread buttered. John Powell didn't do that. John Powell lend his credibility, his knowledge to Ray Scott for the betterment of the sport of bass fishing. Jim Rogers, Silver Troll Motors, Rogers Baits. Jim was bigger than life. He was another guy that, unknowns to me, until I had Bobby Murray on the podcast, that before Bass ever had their first tournament at Beaver Lake, he went to another tournament. Forrest Wood was there. Jim Rogers were there. It's amazing how far back these guys go, but they helped build this sport because they were not selfish, because they understood that their contribution could help make the sport better. And I think guys today may underestimate how important they are and how much their positive comments or negative comments impact the sport. We're all important. There's no big me and little you. And now that everybody's got this social media platform to stand on, all this negativity is not healthy. And it's opposite of what the founders and the original heroes of this sport stood for. And I think there's a lot to be learned from history.
Yeah.
And I think if you look back and you look at these guys and how great they were and how they contributed to the sport and how selfish they were, I think we need to kind of return to that. And the sad part about all this social media is you can post something negative, you'll get way more views, way more likes than you do when you post something positive.
Yeah. But that's just people chase after that drama. Some people can't live without it. They think it's intriguing. It's something, oh, I can jump on that bandwagon. What can we be hateful about now? Now, not that people are purposely just to be hateful, but I think there is more entertainment for people than there really is positivity, and that's just the sad truth of it, of the way people react.
Well, I was told by a friend of mine, you're never going to have good numbers on your podcast until you start doing talking about controversial issues. I went into forward-facing sonar, really didn't want to, but I thought it was a need for that, and I'm not against it. I want everybody to know that. I love it. I fished this week with a young junior high school kid, and he taught me a lot about it, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't want it to be the demise of the sport, and it's so powerful, it's so game-changing that it has the ability to change the sport completely. And I think we need to be careful, and we need to get that right, because I don't think it's fair to the guys that are so good with it. I don't think it's fair to start talking about, well, we need to ban it. We need to make sure we take that away. I don't think that's fair either. I think there is a way to come downstream.
Yes.
What was it? Smoke the peace pipe.
Smoke the peace pipe.
And even though you disagree,
Right.
I'm not going to argue with you. We're going to come together for the betterment of the sport. And so I think these guys that I'm talking about led by example. And I think that their attitude and their contribution to the sport without worrying about a return. They didn't worry about their own agenda so much. It seems like now, and I get it. I've been in that pressure cooker, and I know what it's like. And I'm going to say this, and it's not negative. It's just a fact that will help people understand more about the average professional bass fisherman. There's really, honestly, only about maybe 75 guys out of the 500, 600, however many there are that's touring on all these different circuits today. Probably only 75 of them making a living. The rest of them are going in debt. The rest of them are fighting to stay alive. The rest of them are struggling. And when you're under a lot of pressure, I understand it's really easy to get negative.
Right.
And I get it, but we've got to be careful not to throw the baby out with the water.
Right.
And I think a lot of times we got a problem, we got issues, we got dirty bathwater. But for goodness sakes, let's take the baby out before we dump the water out. We got to make sure we got clean bathwater, but we got to get that baby taken care of before we ever start dumping the water.
Right.
And it seems like now a lot of guys are not thinking, they're just seeing the problem and it's muddy water and they're just dumping it all, baby included, and now we got a mess. And so I hear more and more people talking about, well, I'm going to tell you something, that bass fishing deal, they're in trouble. It seems to me like there's more controversy, more fussing and fighting than there is anything positive. So I don't know where the future of the sport is. Well, hold on, time out. It's just being talked about on social media more. There's really, I remember just reading in these, matter of fact, you can read it in this issue of Bassmaster Magazine, 1970 summer. There are people that are topwater fishermen. In the 50s and 60s, the vast majority of the lures that were being developed were topwater baits. And so there were so many topwater fishermen, and it was a thrill. And then all of a sudden, the plastic worm come on the scene. Well, when the plastic worm came on the scene, it started to dominate. Well, these topwater fishermen were really upset about it. And in this article, in this issue of Bassmaster, there's some guys writing the editor and saying, hey, I think you need to have a bass tournament that is topwater only.
Right.
Get rid of these plastic worms. It's taking the thrill out of bass fishing. When I come down the side of a log with my devil horse and a big bass blows up on it, that's the thrill. Not throwing a plastic worm and getting a thump on the bottom. You don't even know what it is. You don't get the excitement of the splash. It's taken away from the sport of fishing. Well, how insignificant is that issue today?
Right. I mean, y'all, history repeats itself left and right. I mean, it all comes down to preference. And I've seen a lot of that. I've been following a lot of the debates because I'm just curious to see where the majority of people land on the forward facing sonar situation. And most of them are agreeing with you. I've seen a lot of people say make its own division, but there's not going to be a direct answer until I think some people that are more higher up make a decision because, people can talk all day long.
Opinions and
Yeah, opinions.
speculation, and we all do that, and I'm trying so hard. What I think I have to offer, and why I wanted to start a podcast, I have been here from the beginning. Maybe not the very beginning, because Bobby Murray informed me that there was bass tournaments before Ray started the Beaver Lake tournament. I honestly thought that was the first national tournament in the history of the world, was when Ray Scott went to Beaver Lake, Arkansas, and held the first bass tournament. I thought that was the first tournament. Bobby Murray says, no, it was not. He went to a team tournament prior to that. But that was the early days and the beginning. I've been there ever since then. I've watched that Beaver Lake tournament. I watched the Rebel boats, the inboard, outboard boats on Lake Mead in that 1971 Bassmaster Classic. And I watched that unfold. And we talked about Forrest Wood, who had so much contribution to the sport of bass fishing. Ranger boats would have been the official boat of the Bassmaster Classic, the first classic. Ranger had been there with Ray through the whole thing. Forrest had developed the live well for bass fishing, and the plant burned. The Ranger boat plant burned down, and they were not able to build the Bassmaster Classic boat, so they used Rebel bass boats. And Forrest, you never heard him complain. You never heard him down Rebel boats. He took that. It had to kill him inside, because he had contributed so much to the sport. He had helped it get there, and yet his product wasn't showcased in that first classic. But he was such a selfish person that he took it on the chin and continued to contribute no matter what. He was fully supportive, even though it wasn't his product. That's the kind of characters, that's the kind of people that built the foundation of the sport. Everybody wants to say Ray Scott. Ray was the leader. Ray was the founder. Ray was the idea. But all these personalities came together selflessly to help build the sport. Rayo Breckenridge, he won the Bassmaster Classic at Clark's Hill. Rayo was just an incredible, kind person, had a glowing personality, and never worried about what's in it for Rayo. It was always helping bass. Tommy Martin, same way. Tommy Martin, the first time I ever fished with a guy that was really all about time management. Tommy didn't eat lunch. Tommy didn't slow down. Tommy fished as if his hair was on fire.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Well, he set a great example. He and Ricky Green. Ricky was great friends with Tommy, and they teamed together. They laid out ideas together. They set their strategies together. And Ricky and Tommy both were the first two guys that I personally came in contact that taught me how important it is to not waste any time. Don't waste time picking up your trolling motor. Don't waste time scratching your nose. Don't waste time eating a sandwich. Don't waste time. You only have so many hours on the clock. Every cast counts. The one cast you didn't make might have been that 6-pounder that made the difference between winning and losing the tournament. So don't waste the opportunity to make that cast.
Absolutely.
And both of those guys lend their credibility to Ray Scott, bass, the sport itself. D. Thomas. What a controversy tried to be built from the West Coast versus the East Coast. I refused to get in that can of worms, and it went away quickly. And man, the guys, the Bobby Garlands, the Don Ivinos, the Gary Kleins, the David Glebys, and the king of flipping, D. Thomas, all those California guys had so much to contribute. Oh, my goodness. Half the things we were able to learn came from the guys in California. And when they finally came to the East and started, D. Thomas, D came to Flippin, Arkansas. They had a tournament on bull shows, borrowed a boat from Ranger Boat Company, borrowed a boat, and got a guy to ride him around, show him the boundaries of the lake, pulled in a cove, and D looked at that cove, and he looked up and down. He said, I don't need to see any more. I think I can win it right here. Now, that sounds arrogant, but Yogi Berra says it ain't bragging if you do it.
Yeah, confidence is key.
And so D rolls in there, and he never practiced, didn't pick up a rod, went in there first day of the tournament. Well, make a long story short, 3-day total, D. Thomas wins the tournament right where he told the guy, I don't need to see any more. I think I can win it right here.
Wow.
What an awesome guy was D. I had the privilege to go to the California Delta and fish with him just a few years back. D's passed away now, but left a lot of great memories. But I had a delightful day with D. Thomas, and I so much respect him. And another guy. He lent his credibility, notoriety. There was all sorts of articles in Bassmaster Magazine about D and about flipping and how important it is. Incredible. And now we come to Johnny Morris. Johnny Morris. Johnny and Ray. Johnny and Ray, they were in competition. Ray started a mail order catalog called Outhouse, and Johnny started the Bass Pro Shop. Boy, Ray was infuriated by Johnny, and then Johnny came out with Tracker Boat when Ray had a Duracraft boat and a package, and was the first package boat out there. Then Johnny comes out with a much better deal, and there could have been bad blood, but I'm gonna tell you, Johnny took that thing. Johnny refused to get mad at Ray. Johnny loved Ray and respected Ray, but Johnny was doing his own thing in merchandising, but he never once took a shot trying to tear down bass, trying to tear the sport down. He didn't do that. He took it and he just kept it to himself. And Ray may not have liked Johnny, but Johnny refused not to like Ray. Yeah. And as a result, man, look how powerful Bass Pro Shops is. I mean, billion-dollar companies. But that wasn't the motive. The motive was simple, clean, and innocent. And it's amazing how it's all turned out. So when you stop and you look, all these alpha males with personalities that are driven, laid their egos aside, laid their ambition aside, and come together for the common cause to build an incredible sport. And that's what I know. And that's why I wanted to do a podcast. I wanted to share some of those stories. I wanted to share some of that information, and I wanted to and let everybody know I've been a part of all of it. I've watched it go from glass rods to graphite. I've watched all the changes. I've watched it go from 25 horsepower outboards to 250 horsepower outboards. I've watched it go from 14-foot boats to 20-foot boats to 21, 22-foot boats. I've watched all this innovation take place, and I've been a part of it. But I'm going to tell you, the backbone and the foundation of all, a lot of these men that I mentioned, there's so many I didn't mention. Mm-hmm. So many key players, Rick Clunn, Larry Nixon, some of these guys that came second generation. Most of the guys that I named were all first generation, but they're second generation. I was third generation. But there's so many that contributed to make this sport what it is. And they did it under the philosophy that John Kennedy had for America. Mm-hmm. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And that is a simple philosophy that will make a better country. It's a simple philosophy that will make a better sport. So if everybody today takes their social media platform and they use it for the negative, they can tear this thing down one brick at a time. And I don't think people realize how important their input is, positive or negative. So I just want to bring out the good stuff. I want to talk about the positive. And I want to talk about how to rebuild. If there's dirty water, obviously our baby needs clean water. So let's throw the water out, but let's make sure we take care of the baby and we don't throw the baby out with the water. That just doesn't make sense. So we're at a stage now that I go fishing with these young kids. And I just got off the water the day before yesterday with just the coolest kid in the world. He's a junior high fisherman, and he is full of it, boy. I mean, he is so intense. You'd think he was a young Roland Martin. He don't have time to eat a cracker. He don't have time to take a break, and you had to make him drink water. It was 100 degrees out there, so we're getting hot, but you almost had to force him into taking time out. So intense. He doesn't laugh, doesn't cut up, man. He's like Ricky Clun. Don't talk to me. I got my mind on catching this next bass. And it's just amazing. I don't want to discourage that young man. His dream is to become a professional bass fisher.
Right.
I want to help him. I mean, that's why we did Huckleberry. That's what that was all about. I'm over here. It was all about trying to put together an opportunity to give these high school kids and these junior high school kids the opportunity to be self-sustained and not run out of money and have a budget to do what they needed to get done. And that's why we pulled Huckleberry together. But when I fish with these young guys, the last thing I want to do is discourage them.
Right.
And I don't want all this negative stuff all over the internet. And why is it, SaraBeth, now explain this to me, why is it that bad news travels so much more than good news?
I think people want to dwell, whether it's like a poor me or I don't really know what it is. I think it's almost a mentality of a poor me and what can I do for attention. I mean that's just my opinion. Some people just milk it and it's everything negative. Well, this bad thing happened to me today. Well, this bad thing happened to me today. I cannot stand to be around people that never have a good day. And, that might just be their own prerogative or stuff going on in their life. That's one thing. But if you're never saying anything positive, I mean, it just brings people down.
You're exactly right. I talked about Bill Dance earlier. I said, I don't care what he'd have done, he'd have been successful. Dance is never negative. I mean, he might have one or two negative comments about something, but the vast majority of the time you spend with Bill Dance is good times. It's fun. You want to be around him. He's contagious. He wants to entertain you. He wants to be your buddy. He wants to know you. He wants to be your friend. And that is what we need on social media. We need positive stuff. We need good stuff. Our sport is really in great shape in 90% of the areas. Mm-hmm. It's the 10% that we got dirty water we need to clean up. Okay, that's all right. But let's don't take that 10% and turn it around and make it 90%. Because if you're a kid and you're looking at social media, you think the sky's falling.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Everything's bad.
Absolutely.
So we got to figure out a way to, let's slow this thing down. Let's pump the brakes and let's look at the history. Let's look at these guys that I talked about. Let's look at their character. Let's look at what they had to contribute to the sport and why the sport is so great. And you look, I think about there was a guy that came on the scene, J.R. Donovan, I believe was his name. He came on the scene and he was going to throw all this money. He was supposedly one of the guys that found this Spanish ship that was carrying all this gold that they discovered in the 80s or in the 70s or 80s one, I can't remember. And he was a fraud. And he started, man, he got Dance involved. He got Ron Shear. He got all these guys involved. And he had Ray. He sent Ray a couple of these coins to make it look like he was the real deal. and then turned out to be a fraud. In today's world, with all the social media, that might have took the whole sport down. But because of the people and the backbone and the foundation that was built, we were able to withstand that without hardly a blemish or a ripple. Yeah. It was a big deal for a day or two, but it was dismissed, and the sport stands. Right. Because of the selflessness of incredible men that contributed to building the foundation of the sport that makes it so strong today. The big walleye controversy that took place a year or two ago, the guys that stuffed all sorts of things and were charged with criminal offenses, it tainted fishing as a whole. I had friends of mine that don't know anything at all about fishing. They said, boy, I bet that's going to put your sport out of business. I bet that's going to end all this competitive bass fishing. I bet Congress is going to rule on this thing. Man, at these tournaments, people cheat. No, that's not true. It did not taint to the real bass fishermen that understand our sport. It did not taint our sport because we've got a very strong foundation built on the credibility of the guys that I've called out on this page and a lot more. But without that strong stability, when these scandals come, it can take you down.
Absolutely, it can.
And that's why Ray was so absolutely hell-bent on not allowing any kind of cheating to even be talked about. Man, you're out of here. So the sport of bass fishing was built on some incredible people. And as we talk about it on this Independence Day of America, the independence of free speech exists, but biting your tongue sometimes is a lot smarter. Holding back, don't air your dirty laundry out for the whole world to see. If you've got a problem within the organization, keep it there. There's an old saying, what happens in camp stays in camp. I don't know if that's good or bad, but what you air out sometimes out of haste or anger or spontaneity, just blast something out, can't take it back.
Or at least if you have a strong opinion about something, if it is in a negative form and you're really passionate about it, bring it to the people that can actually do something about it, and not just, because a lot of people might just read that one comment and just take all the truth from one post or one video, whatever it is, and then they take it as full truth, and then they fully form their opinion off of one comment. You know, you don't want that to happen. You want people to see the bigger picture. Otherwise, that's how I think things get thrown way off the scales.
I agree with that. And it seems like today that there is more opinions formed just on a social post, and just to hear the one side, and immediately you jump on that side. And I don't want to be guilty of that. I have been guilty of that in the past, and I confess that, and I need to do better as a human being and as an American and as a bass fisherman. I need to do better. So I intend to clean it up and be better. I never want to be unfair on either side. There's two sides of the story, so let's tell them both.
Absolutely.
You know? My buddy Franco Hill used to say, sometimes the only exercise people get is jumping to
conclusions. Yep.
What a character he was. I'm going to talk about him one day. So I know we've ran long and it's been a little bit scattered perhaps, but I think this is a podcast that I have looked forward to doing from day one. I want to talk about the positives and the people that influenced my life. I traveled a long time with Jerry Ryan. Jerry Ryan, he won the Ouachita Bass Tournament. Jerry's fished in a lot of classics, finished third or fourth in the first classic that I ever fished in. Incredible fisherman, and Jerry passed away just a couple months ago. So he's from Stanley, North Carolina. Great guy, had a big influence on me, and I'm grateful for him. So many people. Billy Goff from Columbia, South Carolina, was the king of Santee Cooper. He had just a lot of influence in my life. Charlie Foster, another guy that influenced me, and Woo Daves, who ended up winning the 2020 Bassmaster Classic up in Chicago. Woo had a big impact on my life. So I'm thankful for the guys that I got to meet. I'm thankful for these pioneers that lend their credibility to the sport. So it's not all Ray Scott. It's not all Forrest Wood. They're both just gigantic players, and they're both at the top of the pinnacle. But there were a lot of other people making that pyramid up. And I talked about some of them, left a lot of them off today. Ron Linder, Al Linder, big contributors. But what a great sport we have, because people lend their credibility without being selfish, without worrying about what's in it for me. Let's build the sport, let's participate, and let's have a great time, and look where we are today with that spirit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd say, given that, that's basically a wrap. Happy 4th of July, and make sure you check out Huckleberry Apparel in the description below, and those high school forums are down there as well. So just go give those a look.
I like that. Thank you so much. And I will say, SaraBeth's already told you goodbye, so I'll say goodbye and God bless you. See you next time.